Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. I have a little bit different of a video for you today. Today I woke up and I had the urge to get out into the garden. We've had quite a busy spring so far with Jason quitting his healthcare job and coming to work for the channel full time, planning this Park Winters event. We've had a lot of school sports. It's all been wonderful, but it has been a lot. And I woke up knowing that I had to get in the garden today. I just knew it. So I threw on my overalls, threw on my gardening hat, and I went outside. And luckily, I brought my phone out to press record because this day, I ended up planting so many plants. I had no plans of what I was going to do. I just went outside and I looked at all the beautiful plants that I had from Proven Winners. I grabbed some and I started planting. So the first plant that I was really excited to get into the ground right here in this spot, right in front of the banana cream to Shasta daisies, it was the Whirlwind Blue Scaevola or Whirlwind Blue Fanflower. I love this plant. It is so heat and drought tolerant. I've noticed that the hotter it gets during the season, the more beautiful the flowers on this plant gets. So it's an annual, so it's technically only hardy zones 10 to 11. And I planted this for the first time last year in my cottage garden at my last property. And I need to drive by and see if it's still there because I want to know if it's going to overwinter for me. I'm planning to leave these in this spot, so we will see. But I'm just so impressed with this flower because it can handle tough conditions. Apparently it's an Australian native, so it can handle intense heat, it can handle intense sun, it can even handle humidity for those of you who live in the south. Now they get about 8 to 14 inches tall and about 2 feet wide. So I planted them about 12 inches apart from each other because I want them to really grow into each other and really mound up. And that's what I did at my last house in the cottage garden. And it ended up looking beautiful. And I would love for them to kind of spill over the metal edging that I have right here. As I'm editing this video, I can see what I was doing subconsciously is I was picking out the blooms, the flowers that I was most excited about. I started with the Whirlwind Blue Fanflower, and then I moved on to the Surefire Rose Begonia. And I am in love with this plant simply because it has this beautiful rosy pink bloom and it can handle sun or it can handle shade. So you can see right here, I'm in the shade of one of my orange trees and it gets a lot of shade for most of the day until it gets some bright hot sun. Once the sun gets high enough to go over the orange tree, and then this area does get some intense heat. So it's kind of a tough place. It's not a shade garden bed, but it's also not a sun garden bed. So having the Surefire Rose Begonia there is just gonna solve all my problems, so I just don't have to worry about it at all. So Surefire Rose Begonia gets about 2 feet tall and wide, but the recommendation for spacing is anywhere between 12 to 18 inches. So I ended up planting these 12 inches apart again so it can grow together and become this one big mass of rosy pink blooms. I am so loving how this garden bed in the orchard garden is filling in. This area is probably the area I'm putting most of my attention to right now at this time, and it's really paying off. I have some beautiful shrubs, beautiful perennials, and beautiful annuals, and I am planning to add some taller things in. I'm kind of going back and forth between what statement specimen trees or plants that I want to put in there. So I'll make that decision eventually, but right now I'm just happy to kind of get it filled in. And my plan is to have no plan. My plan is just to have all the colors, not stick to a color theme or color story. I just want as many beautiful saturated colors as I can get in this garden. So right here under the shade of this orange tree is one of Monty's favorite places to lay, just like this. And so I think I'm gonna have to leave some open space right over here so he can keep laying down in the shade of this tree. It's just so cute. He loves it so much. The other wonderful thing about the Surefire Rose Begonia is the foliage. It has this glossy, bronzy foliage that honestly is my favorite out of all the Surefire Begonias. The rose variety is, I just think it's beautiful. And it's gonna pop against the Prairie Winds Lemon Squeeze grasses that I have right there. I have 3 of these fountain grasses, which have this bright chartreuse strappy leaf, and it's going to be such a perfect juxtaposition against the bronze, kind of thicker, bolder foliage of the Surefire Rose Begonia. So hopefully you all can see as I'm digging holes in this soil, this area right here, how beautiful and dark and rich the soil is. And that is because I've said it once, I've said it 10 times, I've said it 100 times, and I'll say it 100 more times. I used the no-till method in this orchard garden bed, and I am so happy that I chose to do that. The soil that was here in this orchard garden bed was dry and compacted and hadn't been touched in years and years and years. And to dig a hole in it, to even use my auger to aug a hole in it was so incredibly difficult. I was using all the strength I had and I wasn't even getting anywhere. So I made the decision last year to add 6 inches of compost just on top of the soil. I didn't even bother tilling the soil beforehand. I put a layer of cardboard down just to slow down the growth of the weeds, and then I just let it sit there, and it sat all winter long, and now I have this beautiful, beautiful soil that has compost mixed in with it, lots of organic matter, and it is so much easier for me to dig in and to plant in, and I know my plants are absolutely loving it. So after I finished up with the Surefire Rose Begonia, I headed back over to the stash of plants that I have on the side of the house, and these Truffula Pink Gomphrena caught my eye. How could they not? They look so beautiful and so happy, and I have to say, Gomphrena, they love the heat. They even do love humidity as well, but they're good in our dry heat. They're really, really happy. I also grabbed some of these lemon coral sedums, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with these. I'm telling you all, I had absolutely no plans for today. I just knew I wanted to get my hands dirty and I wanted to get some of these plants in the ground. So I grabbed some of these lemon coral sedum and I took them back over to the orchard garden and just kind of thought, what am I going to do with these? And it took me a while. I cut out quite a bit of footage with me just standing there staring at my garden like a crazy plant lady. So after some staring and some thinking and some debating, I decided to put the Truffula Pink Gomphrena up here on this mound that I also have my lavender twist redbud. And first I laid them out, and I had planned to put them all along the top of this berm. This berm was part of the Michael Glassman design, and we are going to have a fence around the berm. And so it doesn't look quite done yet, but just kind of imagine it with a fence just completely covering this berm, and it's just going to be inside of this little courtyard that it's going to be the raised ground. So imagine that. I can see where it's going, but for right now, I don't think we're going to get that fence in this year. So I decided I might as well plant it up just to make it look pretty for the time being. So I first placed down the Truffula Pink Gomphrena along the berm, but then to me it ended up looking like a coffin. It ended up looking like I was planting over a coffin, and I thought, okay, I can't do this. I cannot line them up in a line on top of the berm. So instead I started circling the redbud tree and bringing those pink pom-poms all around the red bud, even on the sides of the berm kind of, and that ended up being perfect. I really, really like how that came out. All right, now on to the lemon coral sedum. So this area is just a little bit down from the garden bed that I was working in before. I'm still in my orchard garden bed, and I knew I wanted to plant something right along the pathway, and I couldn't quite decide what I wanted. But then I saw I had all these beautiful, beautiful lemon coral sedum, and I knew I had to line my pathway. So for those of you who've been watching me for a while, at my last house, I had a walkway up into my front door, my front porch area. And along that walkway, I lined it with lemon coral sedum, and it was beautiful. I would describe it as kind of like a runway for an airplane, and the lights along the runway, because the lemon coral sedum was so bright and it was so cheery, and it just guided people up to the front door, which I absolutely loved. So when I was trying to decide what I wanted to put on either side of this pathway, I don't know why it took me so long to decide on lemon coral sedum. It's the perfect thing, and it pops off the cat's pajamas nepeta and the orange blaze nyphophia I have there, and it's just absolutely perfect. So the spacing recommendations that Proven Winners gives for lemon coral sedum is 8 to 12 inches. So remember, the lower end of the spacing recommendation, your plants are going to run into each other, and you're not going to have any space in between plants. The bigger recommendation, the 12-inch recommendation, you're going to have a little bit of space in between the plants. And this, if I read this and I followed this and I knew I wanted the lemon coral sedum to run into each other, I should have planted them a little bit closer to each other. But having experience with this plant and how this plant grows in my climate, I knew that planting 12 inches apart, they were going to grow into each other absolutely no problem. And I was going to have one long hedge of lemon coral sedum, even with planting them 12 inches apart. So by using my drip emitter tubing that had emitters every 12 inches apart, I knew exactly how far apart to dig my hole. And then I had this dibbler that I've ended up using so often. I can't believe how much I use this dibbler in the garden. I wish I had gotten it earlier because I use it so much. It has these lines on it for measurement, and so I basically just chose the same line and spaced that away from the metal edging, so I knew exactly how far from the metal edging to dig my hole. So all of these are planted equally spaced apart and equally spaced away from the metal edging. So they're gonna look nice, and they're gonna look neat, and they're gonna grow into each other, and they're gonna be this beacon of light right along this pathway. So you'll notice that I'm planting all of my plants pretty close to each other. I'm not giving them a lot of space, and I'm doing that on purpose because my goal for this garden bed is to have none of the mulch showing. I want all foliage, and I want everything to be covered because that's going to help with weed control, and I think it's going to look absolutely beautiful. It's the style of gardening that I really, really enjoy. So I am going to be planting all of my plants with the smallest, the tightest spacing that they have without crowding them. And then my plan is actually to come in with some ground cover, whether that be creeping jenny or dichondra silver falls, or even more of this lemon coral sedum. Whenever I have gaps, I'm just gonna throw some of this in there just to make sure that I'm covering everything. After I was done with the lemon coral sedum, I moved on even a little bit more. This direction would be east. I moved on a little bit more east in the orchard garden bed, and I decided to, one, leave a space right at the end of the Cat's Pajamas Nepeta and the Orange Blaze Nyphophia. I wanted to leave a space, and I want to put Helen von Stein lamb's ear in there. I have Helen von Stein lamb's ear in another place in my orchard garden bed, but I just need more. I need more of that beautiful, wonderful plant. So I left a space, and at the other side of that space, I ended up planting this plant that I'm getting in the ground right now. Unfortunately, I can't tell you all about this plant yet because this is a 2025 release for Proven Winners. And Proven Winners doesn't like to talk about their new releases until later on in the season for good reason, and I completely understand. And that is because they don't want everybody to get excited about a certain plant and then head to the garden center, try and find that plant, and then realize that they can't get it until next year. So if you really want to do some searching and you really want to do some sleuthing, you can find the name of this plant online. It's out there for the growers, but I can't talk about it yet for good reason. But just know it's a wonderful plant. It's very exciting. I only got 6 of them and I want way more, but I will talk to you all about this plant later on in the season. So at this point, I had fully intended to stop gardening for the day. It was getting hot. I was getting a little tired. I actually had intended to stop after the lemon coral sedum, but then I got distracted with the 2025s, the pink flowers, and then I got distracted again because I had this beautiful blank space that would look so pretty with some blue flowers in, and I knew I had some Blew My Mind evolvulus that I wanted to plant. So I did the same technique as I did with the lemon coral sedum. I first laid out the emitter tubing because the spacing for Blew My Mind evolvulus is every 8 to 16 inches. So just half of that I decided just to plant right at the 12-inch mark. So by using the 12-inch emitter spacing, it just made it really, really simple. So I planted, instead of in a line like I did with the lemon coral sedum, I kind of did a mass planting of the Blew My Mind evolvulus. Again, you can see I am leaning heavily on heat-tolerant plants in my orchard garden because my orchard garden is also my Best for the West garden. So my intentions for my Best for the West garden is to demonstrate what plants do well for those of us who live in hot and dry climates. There's a difference between a hot and humid climate and a hot and dry climate, and there's a difference between what plants we can grow and what plants will thrive in those differing climates. So for those of us who live on the West Coast, for those of us who live in parts of Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, even Texas, we have dry heat. We don't have any of the humidity, and we can't plant some of the plants that like that extra moisture. So I want my Best for the West garden to be able to show all of us who live in hot, dry climates what you can plant, what will look beautiful, what will thrive, and what might not be appropriate. So everything that I plant in this orchard garden is what I consider a Best for the West plant, and it's only going to be something that I'm not going to have to worry about something that I'm not going to have to put a lot of time and energy and effort into, like a hydrangea. You know, I did plant an oak leaf hydrangea in my Best for the West garden, but an oak leaf hydrangea can handle our hot, dry climate. A panicle hydrangea, you might have to give it extra water to get it to thrive. So that's my goal for the Best for the West, and this Blew My Mind of Volvulus goes right along with those criteria. So I ended up planting over 100 plants today in the garden. When I went back and I counted how many plants I had planted, I was so surprised. I was just planning to get out in the garden and just to mess around. I had no plan, but you can see what a wonderful time I was having just planting. I had gotten into a rhythm, and I think it's exactly what I needed this day. I just needed to calm down, to relax, and to be with nature. And the purpose of this video is not to show you all how many plants I planted in the ground. It's not about that. It's to show you all what a wonderful time I had in the garden with myself, getting dirty, getting sweaty, and being mindful of where I was and being connected to nature and connected to my garden. So hopefully this is a good reminder to you to get out into your garden, how important it is to get our hands in the ground or on plants or watering your plants, whatever it is, whatever you need that feeds your soul. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.